I just talked a little bit about bending forms for the back legs of a couple different chairs, and I'll mention a little bit about the slats. They also have to be steamed and bent as well, and this is a bending form that holds two pairs of two slats for the two slat side chair, the shop stool, or the low back musician's chair that I make using just two slats. And it's important the way these are done in that the radiuses are different on each of these slats. The inner one having the tighter radius for the lower part of your back, and the outer one having a little larger radius for farther up your back when your back starts to flatten out. And so that aspect of making a chair comfortable is really important. And here you can see it even more when it comes to the 6-slat rocking chair, where there are 6 slats with gradually increasing radiuses. And so the comfort of this gradually increasing radius up your back is really nice. And I know when you sit in one of my rocking chairs, you will really enjoy that feel of just being kind of wrapped up by them. And it'll just feel like you're being held very nicely. So anyway, this having two pairs of slats on each side of a bending form, the amazing part of this is that when I was writing my book, making ladder back chairs with Russ Filbeck, and I started that in 2004, researching through the Appalachian Mountains about these chairs and researching the history of immigrants to this country into East Hampton, New York, out on Long Island, down through the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, 7-generation families of chair makers still there, still making chairs. And so what a wonderful history to be able to document some of that. And the Domney family was from East Hampton, New York, and they were 4 generations from the 1740s to the 1860s. And Charles Hummel wrote a book with hammer in hand about this 4-generation family of craftsmen. They were clockmakers, gunsmiths, chair makers, furniture makers. And from 1860 to 1946, I don't know really much about what happened to the home and the shop and everything, but I know in 1946 everything was demolished and for development out on Long Island. The DuPont family somehow realized that the Domney family history and their crafts were really important. So before all of that was demolished, they took all of the equipment from this Domney family shop and they brought it to the Winterthur Museum in Delaware and rebuilt that entire shop inside that museum. So you can go there today and see this. Well, when I read that book with hammer in hand, and I saw this what looks to be a crude bending form where you can bend 2 sets of slats, one on each side, compared to what I was doing with bending 1 set of slats at a time, and they were open on both sides so they could warp and move around. And when I saw this, and I could see that all you had to do was pull a pin, and this piece of that form would slide out, and you could bend both sets of slats down, slide the cap back in place, put the pin in, and let them dry. and they would dry in this perfect shape, one pressing down on the other, so they weren't moving around. And oh my God, I just was so over the top with excitement when I saw that, and couldn't believe I'm looking at something that's 250-year-old technology, and I just had stumbled upon it. And that brought me to build my own. And I built a 2-slat form, a 3-slat, so I could build for the slats on the 3-slat chair, and the 6-slat rocker, and the 4-slat armchair. So that's how these came to be. And I can't tell you how much more comfortable the rocking chair, all of my chairs have been since I started using this style of form. So I just am always amazed at the ingenuity that's gone on before us, that's maybe somewhere locked away in museums, just waiting to be reactivated, you know, and put back into use. And so I'm just thrilled to have come upon these and be able to share these. And certainly the drawings for these are in my book. All of my patterns, everything on how to build these books, build all of these chairs, all of the jigs and fixtures are in the back of the book for you. A page is written by John Alexander, who was the revivalist of this greenwood chair making back in the 70s. And then certainly Brian Boggs got John Alexander's book and realized that's what he wanted to do. And so, and then I learned from Brian. Brian taught me. And of course, I found out that President Carter made these chairs, and from some articles in woodworking magazines. And of course, I knew that Roy Underhill made these chairs as well from the Woodwright shop. And I knew I could get John and Brian and Roy to write a page in my book because I already knew them. And I told Carol, wouldn't it be cool if I could get President Carter to write a page in my book? And she said, oh yeah, just go call up a president. And I kind of chuckled at that and said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And so I called the Carter Center, and they said, well, you don't just call him up and talk to him. You send us a letter and tell us what you want to talk to him about, and if he wants to talk to you, he will. And so I get a call back in about 3 weeks, and they said, on this date at this time, you'll have 30 minutes to talk with him. And I didn't realize at that time, it was quite some time later that I found out that he never gives anybody more than 15 minutes, maybe 20 if it's a very important reason, but never 30. So I later realized how important that 30 minutes was. And so on that date, I call him, and he answers the phone. Hello, this is Jimmy Carter. And his southern drawl, and I said, this is Russ Filbeck. And he said, I've been so anxious to talk to you. And he said, everybody wants to talk politics, but nobody wants to talk about chair making and chair making tools. And he said, how you doing? And I said, well, I'm kind of nervous. And he said, well, you wouldn't be nervous if we were in the wood shop, would you? And I said, no. And so from that minute on, it was this awesome, easy conversation. And we talked about his tools, how he bends his legs, and how he harvests his hickory bark. Talked about cutting a tree down close enough to the house and cutting them into small enough pieces so that Rosalind could help him drag the pieces into the yard so he could start splitting them apart and making his chair parts. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? A president and first lady out here dragging logs around? So anyway, that's him, because that's exactly who he is, and Rosalind. So that conversation is his page in my book. And during that conversation, I asked him if he would like to have one of my spoke shaves. And he said yes, because I'd sent him a picture of one. And at the end of the conversation, I said, well, how would you like one of my rocking chairs? And he said, I would love it. I said, cherry or walnut? He said, cherry. I said, well, this is July. I come back to Kentucky to harvest trees and hickory bark for my students to make chairs at Palomar College. I will bring your chair to you next July, or next June, and 11 months later. So I'm building his chair, and Carol says to me, he says, you're building this beautiful chair for him. I said, you better do something for his wife. You guys better listen to your wives, because that was wonderful piece of advice from her. And I said, what do you think I can make? I said, how about a set of cherry shaker boxes to match his chair? And she said, that'll be fine, just as long as you don't forget her. And so that's what I did. I made her a set of cherry shaker boxes, and him his rocking chair. And so when I delivered them to the Carter Center, he sat down in and he rubbed the arms, and he looked up at me and he says, if you don't mind, I'm going to take this chair to my home in Plains. And I said, I don't mind. And because quite honestly, in his office in Atlanta, it's full of Sam Maloof furniture. So I felt very honored to have him take my rocking chair to his home. And I've been to his home, and it's there. And Rosalind's shaker boxes are there on a cedar chest in their bedroom that he made for her. And she told me, she said, I so enjoy my shaker boxes. And so, cool stuff. And so when I gave him that chair, he went behind his desk, took out several books, started signing them to me. I get back home and I read them. And in one of them, he talks about how he makes a piece of furniture each year to go in this fundraising auction that the Carter Center does each year to keep the Carter Center going. The library and museum are federally maintained, but not the Carter Center. It's all privately funded. And so I got to thinking about it, and I called him back and I said, you know, I think if I make a replica of your spoke shave, Rosalind's boxes, and your rocking chair, if I donate those to your auction, I think they'll bring good money. And he said, I agree. So I immediately got to work. So this would have been July of '05, because it was '04 when I first talked to him. And so that chair and the boxes and the spoke shave went to auction the following February of '06, and they brought a bunch of money, and I just couldn't believe it. And the shaker boxes brought $1,000, and the spoke, or $6,000. The spoke shave brought $1,000, and I got to do this again. And I've been doing it every year since. And the prices have just been going up, up, and up. And so to be able to make things that support something like the Carter Center, something that really helps thousands of people, is just, it just makes me very happy and proud that this work means something, and really means something to a lot of people. And I think we can all do that. It just, we pick out our charity that we want to support and make something happen. And this woodworking thing, I mean, it's an unending source of pleasure, joy, and creativity. I mean, if you get tired of making clocks or chairs, you can certainly go into marquetry and veneering and scrolling. It's unending what you can do. So, and if you're interested in my book, certainly you can order it on my website, russfilbeck.com, and we'll get it right out to you. A little bit about turning on the lathe. You can create some just amazing pieces with small pieces of wood. They don't have to be large pieces. This is Norfolk Island pine that grows here locally, right here on my own street. This, however, is a little bit unique. This piece and this piece, these are both ancient Kauri wood. This is greater than 50,000 years old. It's from the northern island of New Zealand, and pretty special pieces made from that ancient Kauri wood. This piece, interesting as well, with all of these splotches on it. That's starch. According to my research, the tree stores starch and carbohydrates as food, and it's these big splotches in this, and this happens to be Angelique, and Angelique is unique for that feature. And this was part of the keel of the San Salvador that we built here in San Diego several years ago. It's the best they can determine, a replica of the sailing ship that Juan Cabrillo sailed into San Diego Bay in 1542 when he was exploring the west coast of North America. And so that was a great deal of fun. Many of my students from Palomar College spent a lot of time helping build that ship, and Mike was even involved a lot in building that ship as well. But just some wonderful small pieces. This is curly Tasmanian eucalyptus. Curly koa from Hawaii. And it doesn't have to be a very big piece to appreciate the beauty that's in the wood.
Russ, could you bring him a little closer? It would be helpful. Okay, good.
This is Bubinga. What I found beautiful about Bubinga was the sapwood. It has this iridescent silver color, which just stunning. The clocks that I like to make are the arch dial mantle clock, and this is a contemporary pendulum clock that can be a wall clock, or in the way I have it, it can also be a mantle clock. It can be either one. And certainly walnut is just absolutely one of my favorite woods, cherry and walnut both. For clocks, I believe I like walnut especially well. And one of the things really nice is when you can find the crotch grain of walnut, and this flame or feather pattern is just stunning in the beauty of that. And it makes a wonderfully unique piece. This piece happens to be going to a cousin of mine, and on this style of clock I like to do the stained glass, and the stained glass just adds a really wonderful element to woodworking. And I think and the dial glass is a rolled antique German glass, which has a really nice texture in it as well. I wanted to do one more thing before I wrap up, and that was just a quick little demonstration of how I make the tenons on the chairs that I make. And so we'll just wrap that up with that.